break down the fighting style of pros, I have to look at low-level solo cash cup games where they're fighting against less skilled players. But with Peterbot, he was able to drop 83 eliminations, an average of 8.3 a game in the finals against the best players on the region. He won this tournament by over 120 points. So let's see why it's literally impossible to beat Peterbot. Pete lands at Crime City, and in his successful games, he averaged 3.4 eliminations in the first two zones. Crime City has a few advantages, but one of them that isn't talked about that much is actually the slurp barrels. In total, Crime City has 31 slurp barrels, the most of any POI, so players leaving here don't have to waste as many of their inventory heals. In this game in particular, everyone else who landed at the POI disengages, but in most games, this isn't the case. When Peterbot does have to actually fight them, his strategy is pretty much just to grab a shotgun and run at them as fast as he can. If you're Peterbot and you have the best aim in the game and you are the best fighter and you just have any weapon, you're probably going to win more fights than you actually lose, so the faster he pushes the players, the more loot there is left over for him to take. Plus, doing this quickly gives him siphon materials, which gives him a material advantage over the other contesting players. So being able to finish fights quickly is a massive advantage. Once he's cleared out Crime City, he then goes for the vault, which gives him over 800 gold and 2 dilbits, which he can then take over to the black market to the north to buy a boon or any weapon upgrades that he needs. Now in Chapter 6, the train has a guaranteed mythic pump in one of the rare chests for some reason, so players often land on it just to capture it straight away. Once the 2 turrets on top of the train have been destroyed, the train will stop moving, and since the train always starts in the same location, this means that it nearly always stops somewhere close to Crime City, so naturally this is where Pete rotates to next. Now in game 1, this was already looted and the player had rotated away, so he obviously cannot get the mythic pump. However, there is often a good shotgun left behind, since the player who took the mythic either dropped something or didn't take another shotgun over this, so in this game Pete is able to upgrade to a purple pump. Now, I actually lied. Just because the mythic sentinel pump has been looted, that doesn't mean that Peterbot can't get it. Because the player who claims the train will most likely get the unstoppable medallion from fighting the Fletcher Kane boss that also spawns here, this means that they are shown on the map. So Peterbot will always know where the player with the mythic pump is just by simply checking his map. So in game 2, where Rapid is the one who claims this loot, he chases him across the map, fighting him for over 5 minutes until he wipes him out and claims this shotgun. He also does this in game 6, following the player all the way to magic mosses before fighting him and taking him out. The train will also give the players dilbits, so if he manages to wipe out this player, not only can he get the mythic pump, he can also get another mythic from one of the other black markets as well. So his off-spawn strategy is pretty straightforward. Loot a building or two, get vault, go black market, get the train, key someone for the mythic pump if you don't get it from the train. There are a few other interesting things in the early game though that I saw across these games. He pretty much always lands on a floor spawn that will allow him to get the fastest elim. In game 2, he slid off a ramp and landed on an AR floor spawn, which allowed him to elim craze out of the sky. And then with the siphon materials, he was way more stacked than any other player on the drop spot, which allowed him to key quickly. He doesn't waste any time harvesting these slow materials, and he would frequently push out to the gold veins around the map, which increases his harvesting speed. Then he can just very quickly harvest the brick and the wood all around him without really wasting any time. And in game 3, he shows how strong Tex's ping is by hitting a crazy 50-50 squirrel wheel on this floor spawn. So his off spawn looks incredibly strong as it sets him up with quite literally the best loot in the game, but he also died in the early game in 5 of his 10 games, and there's a bit of a trend in all 5 of them. In game 4, he tried to mantle into the window and got 2 pumped by the outlaw shotgun. In game 5, he got 2 elims in Crime City and then got 2 pumped by an outlaw shotgun. In game 8, he was able to eliminate Rapid in Crime City, and then someone ran into his face with an auto shotgun. In game 9, someone ran in his face with an auto shotgun, and then finally in game 10, he had an auto shotgun, but someone pickaxed through his wall, ran in his face, and just one-pumped him. Now, this video may be titled, "It's literally impossible to beat Peterbot," or something like that, but I am seeing a trend where every time Peterbot dies, it's just because someone runs at him in his face. So NA, give that a try. I'm not sure if you've thought about that yet. Basically, if someone doesn't run into his face in Crime City with an auto shotgun, Peterbot has multiple different ways to get insanely powerful loot, which sets him up very nicely to fight in the mid game. And man, Did he fight in the mid-game? In the games where he didn't die off spawn, Peterbot averaged 5 elims between the 3rd and 9th zone. In this fight in game 1, Peterbot takes advantage of the fact that the other player is just missing build pieces. On approach, he stands on a cone, and the wall that he stands on means that the other player has to make a really awkward wall edit in order to hit a shot. Interestingly, this other player decided to make quite literally the worst edit he possibly could have, being a bottom left for himself and a bottom right for Peterbot. So don't do that, by the way, if you're going to try and edit on someone at this angle. But regardless, Peterbot approaches this with his pickaxe out, and his crosshair placement is directly in the center of the wall, which means that even if the other player had done a good edit, his pickaxe would almost be guaranteed to hit the wall. If your crosshair is here in the center, the only edits they can do that will actually make you miss would be a top 6 tile or one of the side 6 tile edits. So by keeping your crosshair directly in the center of a wall whilst trying to replace it, you guarantee that hit. Now, since the other player had just edited, the wall is weak, which means he can take it in one hit. But as he does this, he slides a ramp in and replaces the wall at the same time. Then his edit selection is absolutely perfect. He decides to do a bottom right edit, then grabs the wall to the left, which the other player was missing, and then edits the ramp. But most importantly here, as he does this, a lot of people who end up doing Mongo Classics, as this is kind of called, run inside of the box and may end up 50-50ing. But Peterbot does all this whilst still just standing still outside of the box, so that he has control of the wall between him and the other player. Now the other player is actually on that full side wall, so now, whilst still staying outside of the box, he does another bottom right tile edit, which gives him a great right hand peek over both of his own walls, and from the other player's perspective, means he can barely see him whatsoever. Then it's just a case of simply shooting him with the shotgun, resetting the wall to block the shot, and then finishing him off with an AR shot. Now the timing of when Peterbot switches to his assault rifle in fights is actually really interesting. In this example, he starts off the fight by spraying the other player for some damage, and then as he approaches the freshly built wall, he pickaxes it once and then switches to his shotgun to replace it. Since the opponent is then moved back into a new box with some freshly built pieces, Peterbot walks into this box and crouches behind the enemy cone. From this position, it doesn't matter what edit the other player will make, he actually just won't be able to see Peterbot at all. But the bigger advantage here is because this wall is freshly placed, as soon as that other player can edit it, it will be weak enough for Peterbot to replace it with his pump shotgun. So basically, if the other player does anything to get damage onto him, Peterbot can take the wall. Now, most players in this scenario where you've just taken a wall with your shotgun will make the mistake of taking out your shotgun yet again to try and shoot the other player. However, the most common play that good players will make is to edit their cone. So if you do shoot them, you're just going to shoot their cone and break it, meaning you're then left with your assault rifle to deal damage to the player. But what Peterbot does here, knowing this is going to happen, is every single time he pump replaces, he then takes out his assault rifle, replaces the cone, switches to his pump, and then can actually deal big damage with this rather than having to hip fire them with an assault rifle. The rest of this fight is also really interesting because he kind of repeats what he did earlier with the cone, but in a slightly different way. The opponent reboxes up above him, so Peterbot goes right back onto the side and swings his pickaxe once on the wall, and then just pulls out his shotgun. Now remember, the structure damage of this is so high and the wall was freshly built, so no matter what edit Leon makes, if Peterbot keeps his crosshair on the player, he can either shoot Leon, or if Leon makes an edit where he's hiding behind it, you can just replace the wall. So basically, just by swinging your pickaxe once and then staring at the other player, you guarantee yourself the advantage as long as your reaction times are fast enough. Mine are not. It's important to know that one pickaxe plus one sentinel pump shot won't actually break a wall if it starts fully built. So this specifically works because the other player just built it and then edited it, which weakened it down to very low HP. The very next elim in this game is also a really good example of another way that this can be very successful, where he's just taken damage, but the other player is still very, very weak. Now he's standing on the other side of a wall that he shot a couple of times with his assault rifle, so it's also weak, and he just stands here waiting for the other player to pre-fire him. Then, once the wall is broken, he just shoots him back. But the important muscle memory here is that he also places his own wall instead. This means that if the other player didn't shoot his own wall, or he had just placed a fresh one, Peterbot would be able to grab this piece regardless. One of the reasons he's able to do this is because of what I call the shotgun time. Now, I originally was going to call this the pump time, but it's not that kind of channel. Watch this next elimination and look how long he has his shotgun out for. Every single time he does an action, every build he places, every time he pickaxes, just before every edit, he always has his shotgun out and he's always staring his crosshair right at the other player. I would predict that like 80% of his fighting is just him looking at the other player with his shotgun out. Not only does this allow you to shoot them or take their wall if they edit, but it also just allows him to read and predict what the other player is doing. But do you see what Peterbot is doing in this clip? He's kind of just standing in the open, half behind behind this peanut butter edit, just reloading his shotgun, and you might be surprised to hear that this is actually an amazing box fighting strategy. One of the most important parts of fighting is continually applying pressure to the other player. You can do this by pickaxing, shotgunning, or spraying with a spray weapon, but something that holds you back is reloading, because any time spent reloading is not time spent shooting or pressuring. Now, what a lot of people don't know about the pump shotguns is that as you're reloading, you can actually just cancel this by shooting. So something that Peterbot does all the time is that when he's predicting another player to edit, he just reloads his shotgun. This means that if they edit, he can shoot them or shoot the wall to replace it, and if they don't, then he's just got another bullet reloaded into his shotgun that he can then continue to pressure the other player with. Another thing Peterbot does really well is phase in. Now, most people know how to phase into a box, but there's actually a new one this season using the gold splash. It's really difficult to time a wall phase in by just shooting it or pickaxing it as you walk forward, but the faster you move, the easier this is. So in this example, Peterbot opens the fight with a big damage and then uses a gold splash, which will increase his movement speed. So when he drops down onto the player's wall, he pickaxes it once and then walks forward, and then all he needs to do is just pump the wall once and he'll easily phase into the box. Then he can just switch to his assault rifle and finish off the player fast. Now, when you think of Peterbot, you probably think of his insane ability just to consistently frag out in the end game. And across the 5 games in this tournament that he made it there, he averaged 4.8 elims from the 9th zone onwards. He has a very specific playstyle with a couple of trends that are relatively obvious. The first is that he tries to take as little damage as possible. Now, this sounds very obvious, but similar to reloading, time spent using heals is just a complete waste. During this time, you can't reload any of your weapons, can't pressure anyone, or you can't fight for anyone, so it's just completely dead time. So he does this in a few ways. The first is whenever he's going to fight someone near him, he always boxes off every other angle that he could possibly get sprayed from to ensure he doesn't get third-partied. And that also plays into the style of how he gets refreshes in endgame. A lot of players get to the front side and spray back, and Peterbot does that sometimes, but the vast majority of his eliminations in the endgame are him boxing up next to players and box fighting them. Then, if that player fights back or realizes that Peterbot is actually on his wall, he'll usually switch targets and go for someone else. Now, the way that he finds these players is that he's consistently scouting. He'll rotate, make 1 or 2 boxes, then you'll just see him spinning around in his box, looking at every single angle, gaining as much information as possible. Now, as I mentioned, he does spray back sometimes, but a lot of the times what he does is actually wait for the zone to catch up and then spray players that are rotating in front of him. Now, it's really hard to 200-0 someone in this scenario, so after beaming them, he basically just chases them and then box fights them. In game 3, for example, he cracks a player who's jumping to the front side, and then as that player starts to get lobby focused, he actually jumps over where that player is boxed to go behind them to ensure he doesn't get shot, resulting in this player getting pinched by the lobby spray and then also from Peterbot on the other side. Basically, he's the best fighter in mid-game, and he just makes really smart rotates in the end game and then just uses that box fighting skill to fight all the players around him. Now, if after all this you're still sitting there thinking, man, he just cheats, you can click on this video on screen right now to see how Peterbot beat the allegations. For years,